We're going to talk about the reigning NBA champions, the Boston Celtics. And I'm not going to lie, there's not a lot that's changed on this team, but we've still got stuff that we can talk about because Michael Bolton's here.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I'm very demure and very mindful. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok, at redrock_bball, and on Instagram, at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We're available on all platforms. So hit the thumb, leave the comments, subscribe, audio and video. I know it's not really selling it very much, but the Celtics preview show is going to be short and it's going to be boring. It's not going to be boring because John Karalis is an entertaining and engaging man, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about just from a general perspective, but this is the same team as last season. We're going to focus a lot, I'm guessing, on the center position, but otherwise, it's a lot of the same stuff. So just, you can let it, if it's going to bore you, that's fine. If you're a Celtics fan, you can revel in the excitement that is this team, but there's not a lot that is changing on this squad overall. So here he is, the man that hosts the Locked On Celtics podcast. He is reveling in the glory of another championship. It is is noted author John Karalis, who is here. I'm surprised you don't have just an array of all of your best-selling books sitting there so you can hold up while we're doing this intro.
Yeah, all of my best-selling books are currently on display.
Yeah, well, let's be real, John. Like you've how many Celtics books you've written now? Two. Yeah, two. So I got the championship book is the latest one to come out, and again, yeah, there it is. Oh yes. Built Different, brought to you by Built Bar. Go and have a look at John's book if you are a Celtics fan or want to check out. Great work as well. But John, we're not here to talk about, we can be here to talk about your book because we're going to talk about the Boston Celtics, and
it's going to be the single most different thing between last season and this season. Last season, I didn't have a book with this team. This season, I do have a book with this team. Nothing else has changed.
The funny thing is that it's not funny. It's actually just something that I'm noticing. I'm recording this show with you now, and then straight after this, I'm recording the Cavs season preview. And I think between the two teams, there's been one player signed that wasn't a draft pick, and I'm not even sure that's true. I don't think either team's actually signed a single player this offseason. So we'll see what that is. But this is, again, a team that hasn't made any significant changes, because why would you? They won 64 games last season. They were the favorites for the championship for the majority of the season. They were relatively untested through the playoffs, and everybody comes back for this second go around. So I'm going to put a graphic up on the screen of the players that have come and gone, and there's no one. Look, Baylor Shireman was drafted, and Anton Watson finally signed his two-way as a second-round pick. I'll just use this little portion of the show. Like we talked last year about Jordan Walsh, and people thought he'd get minutes, and we both said that was crazy. Is it crazy that Shireman can find any sort of role on this team?
It's unlikely. I would actually say Watson is more likely to find a role. He seems like more complete. If he can get his confidence and his shooting up, he actually has some of the skills that could defensively get him onto the floor here and there. I think Shireman, I don't know what his shot's going to look like in the NBA. If he can hit 3-pointers and defend, he passes at a pretty high level. So I'm not going to say he won't have a chance, but there's a pretty established hierarchy. And unless something happens to somebody, or if Sam Hauser gets, bopped in the head and forgets how to shoot, then I don't think anybody else outside of the guys that we saw last season is going to have an opportunity, a meaningful opportunity to make a contribution.
Yeah, because when we did this show this time last year, I can't even remember whether Drew Holiday I think he had arrived on this. I don't really remember, but we weren't certain what they're going to do with the starting line. Was Horford going to start? Was Drew going to start? Like how they were going to run that? What was Pritchard going to even play? Like who was going to fill in? We said that they've got a really good top group and it's pretty low depth after that. We weren't sure where House's role is, but we've seen that happen. Those questions have been answered. They were all successful. So look, what is going to change? And then when you look at the guys that they lost, there's no one. Like Svi Mykhailiuk just signed with Utah, I think, and O'Shea Brissett is floating around, and they didn't play really at all, apart from a couple of meaningless stints down in March and April, and it's just nothing really changed at all with this squad. So again, we're going to get to the big thing that is hanging out there in a second, but in terms of just the overall structure of the team, its coaching staff's intact. There's nothing different.
Yeah, other than Charles Lee leaving to become head coach of the Charlotte Hornets and taking a couple of assistants with him, it's going to be a little bit of a shakeup on the bench, and that is the biggest change. But that doesn't change much because Sam Cassell is still going to be here, and maybe he slides up a seat to the associate head coach role. And but nothing's changing with Joe Mazzulla, and this is only his third year, and he just won a championship. So the rest of the staff, the front office stays completely intact, unless you count Jeff Van Gundy, who was here in an advisory role, leaving. And hey, any little departure, you say, hey, that's a voice that's not there, and they do have to kind of change a little bit. But again, nothing that you look at and say, oh, that could cause a problem. It's the same basic team with the same principles, with the same everything. They're just trying to do it all over again.
In terms of Joe Mazzulla, obviously you've had interactions around the team. Like, is he okay? I don't know how to phrase this. The man seems like incredibly humorous, but incredibly intense and weird and insane in the best possible way. Like every time I see him speak, I'm just like I show him to my wife. And I go, bro, can you like watch this guy talk? Like this is like the stuff that like it's like what dreams are made of. Watching this man talk, it's like what is happening in this guy's head? Is that like is it a thing he puts on for the camera? Is he? Oh wow, okay. So he's just like that. Oh my.
He's a lunatic. I love him.
It's legitimately. I cannot like admire that level of lunacy like anymore. It is like it's unhinged, and sometimes I go like he's playing a bit like he just deadpans everything. Like I don't know. Maybe I should flash it up on the screen. There's a picture of him throwing out a first pitch at a Red Sox game, and he's still looking the same. Like he's out there on the mound and he's just staring like blankly. Like, bro, what are you doing? But it's obviously works. His approach works, and it's the most fascinating man almost in the NBA, I reckon.
Yeah, he's. I love Joe. I don't know. Maybe we're both Rhode Islanders, so maybe we both have similar kind of like we drank the same water. So maybe we're both a little crazy. But I get where he's coming from. I get what he's doing. I understand what he's doing because it's a very matter of fact, kind of grizzled. It is a very New England thing. It's a little bit like negative, but in a positive way, if that makes any sense to anybody outside of this area. He shows affection by, busting your chops. He's like, he likes to test people. He likes to see if I push you, what's your reaction going to be? Cause that informs his opinion of the people around him. And so he pushes his players, he presses buttons. He tries to see, all right, if you're aggravated, okay, now you're in an agitated state. Go play basketball. Now let me see what you got. Because it's not going to be rainbows and puppy dogs around here. It's not always going to be great. You're going to have bad stretches. Your teammates are going to have bad stretches. They're going to miss you on passes, and you're going to miss them on passes. How do you guys navigate this? And how do you get out of a comfort zone so you can see the game a little bit differently and maybe grow? And that's where Drew Holiday has his highest praise for Mazzulla, where he said he made me see defense in a different way. This is Drew Holiday, who's in his 30s, who has been a defensive, stalwart, who's been a first-team all-defense guy, who's been in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. And here he comes playing for Joe Mazzulla, and he's guarding bigs, and he's on the back line, and he has to see different coverages. And Joe got him out of his comfort zone, and he grew as a player. Derek White has, he comes to Boston, weird circumstances with Ime Udoka, and then Joe Mazzulla comes in, and Joe goes to him and says, "Hey, man, you're my starter." And so he instills confidence in Derek White to the point where White, after the season was over, on the podium, was like, "I would do anything for Joe." He took the maximum amount of money, but he could have waited to free agency and probably gotten more, especially after everybody saw him on the Olympic stage. But he wanted to be in Boston. He wants to play for Joe Mazzulla. So he's a lunatic, but he challenges his players and they respond. And I think they understand that it is all love, that he's doing it because he loves them and he wants them to be their best. And he genuinely shows them a pretty high level of affection as at the same time as he's challenging them. So he's a unique head coach, but man, he's a guy who gets people to respond.
Do you think that Joe is the one who told Derek White to cut his hair?
He might have challenged him.
Oh, yeah.
He might have made a bet, like some sort of like Brazilian jiu-jitsu. If I can get you to tap out, you have to shave your head. I can see that.
I completely forgot that this guy's like a jiu-jitsu guy as well. We go to extra levels. But I actually do have more to talk about, despite there not being much to talk about with this team, and we'll get to that in a sec. But today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is the formula for winning championships. The Celtics have the formula for winning championships, and honestly, having that patience with Joe Mazzulla led them there, because there were discussions in the Eastern Conference Finals. Maybe he's not the man for the job, but coaches improve, players improve, people improve, and getting the right things and having the right fit is what's important, and eBay Motors knows that too. Now, Joe Mazzulla might not be a supercharger, he might not be an exhaust kit, maybe he is the LED headlight that we all need in our life, but eBay Motors has all of those things that are available for your car. Over 122 million parts available for your number one ride or die. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, you know that the part you're getting is going to fit your car, because if it doesn't, you get your money back. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and eBay Guarantee Fit is only available to US customers. I want to look at the projected starting group here, and absolutely not one single person, John, is going to be shocked that it is Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Al Horford. Did you consult Jason Tatum's parents when putting that list together in the rotations in case they had any problems with it?
Yeah, I wanted to start Devin Booker in his place, but league rules didn't allow that, so I had to go with Tatum. I
do want to talk about Drew Holiday here, because we weren't really sure, again, whether who was going to start, whether we were going to go small or go bigger. And Drew took what was a gigantic role sacrifice offensively. His usage dropped, I'm going to say 25 to 16 or something like that. It fell down. Even his defensive playmaking role was different. His steal numbers dropped pretty considerably too. There's no real reason that any of that sort of offensive hierarchical stuff will change, because it was very clear that, I don't even know how you determined who the point guard was between Derek White and Drew Holiday, but I don't think anyone watching those games would suggest that Drew Holiday was having a larger offensive role than Derek White. Do you think there's going to be any sort of adjustment with that stuff?
The only thing I can think of is that maybe they start off a little, maybe limiting Holiday's minutes a little bit more. He's on the other side of 30 now, and the workload, the guarding bigs throughout the season, the shorter off season, the Olympic, he had a pretty decent role on Team USA. So I wonder if they might just say, hey, look, we're going to keep you at 20, 25 minutes through November, December, and slowly start ramping you up, which might mean a little bit more time for Peyton Pritchard, or maybe this is an opportunity for Jaden Springer to come in and be one of those solid defenders. It all really depends on Jaden Springer's jumper, which showed he didn't have a lot of time in summer league, but he was hitting some of those shots. If he can come in and hit some shots this summer, this training camp, then maybe the Celtics can limit some of the guys. Maybe they can limit even Jason Tatum to, instead of 38 minutes, he's playing 33 minutes because of, again, the Olympics and just the shorter time frame, a weirder time frame for getting your offseason work done. You want to make sure that these guys are ready for when it matters. That's the only thing when it comes to anybody's playing time, is how do they manage the October, November, December, basically pre-All-Star break stuff with these guys. So I think Holiday, similar role, same role, basically, and just minutes-wise, you might see it a little bit lower to start the season.
In terms of the bench group, we've got Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser, who were those 20, 23 minute-a-night players last season. But then this is where the interesting part comes in. Obviously, on the starting group, we had Al Horford at center. We're going to talk Porzingis in a second, and he's going to start there. But now that means that the guy that's the backup center is not Al Horford anymore because he's going to be the starting center. So you've got Luke Cornett and Xavier Tillman, and Tillman came across after the trade deadline. They were sort of mixing and matching a lot of stuff there. The other guy that you haven't included in that group is Neemias Queta, who I think a lot of people were impressed with what he did through Summer League as well. Do you see it being one of those? Because even last year, when there were times where Porzingis was out, like Horford would start and then he would sit. Then sometimes it was Cornette, and sometimes it was Tillman, and sometimes it was Queta. Do you think we're going to do a little bit of that sort of rotational? Let's just see who it's going to be on a night by night basis situation.
Yeah, it could be a mix and match thing because Luke Cornett's very capable, but every once in a while he just doesn't have it, and you can kind of tell when he doesn't have it. So it might just be this was a bad 5-minute stint for him, so he's done for the night. Queta comes in. Tillman is a small ball kind of like, I don't even want to say Al Horford light.
No,
Al Horford
he is
super light.
No, but he is because he's like a slightly smaller guy that probably should be a power forward, but is a center, but he passes really well. He's like does these good defensive positional things. He hasn't developed the 3-point shot like Horford, but like it's comparing Queta to Horford, like these are obviously clearly not the same guy. In terms of running things similarly with Tillman and Horford, like you might have to squint a little bit, but it makes a little bit of sense. They can do some similar things. So a Cornette, Queta, Porzingis makes more sense as sort of grouping together, I guess.
And Tillman physically looks like Al Horford to the point where
except older.
We're all watching games and you're like, oh, I didn't expect Al Horford to do. Oh, that's Xavier Tillman. Okay, I got you.
Tillman legitimately looks older than Al Horford. Like he looks 10 years older than Al Horford somehow, even though there's about 15 years difference. Yeah.
I forget that he's like 25.
I think it doesn't help that he's called Xavier Tillman Senior as well, and he looks like he's ready to retire. But yeah, like the difference in how those guys look is pretty crazy.
It is pretty funny. Look. Same thing with Tillman with the jump shot, but also comfort level. Coming in mid-season, and he was dealing with a knee thing when he came to Boston. He even missed a few games to start, and it's hard to assimilate, move your family, get your wife and kids over to Boston and deal with all of that stuff. You think about just Derek White when he first came to Boston. There was a real learning curve. He was nowhere near the player he is now. And that had to do with comfort level and understanding what they want and getting your confidence up. So there's a possibility here that Tillman comes into camp as a different player than we saw at the end of the season. And he made that one. He had that one decent performance in the finals, and that was enough. And he's always capable of doing something off the bench. And if you want to go small and play a more switchable defensive lineup, he's the guy to put in there. And they're going to have to do that because you mentioned Porzingis. If Horford's coming in and starting, he's still not going to play back-to-back. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for Tillman, Cornette, and Queta. Like Cornette's going to get starts. Tillman might get starts. You might even see a spot start from Queta somewhere in this mix over the first few months.
And that's that's what's going to be interesting for fantasy managers as well, is when the schedule comes out, like how many back-to-backs do the Celtics have in the first 2 to 3 months of the season? Because there'll be no Porzingis and no Horford in those games. So we've got to look like if they have 3 back-to-backs in the first 3 weeks of the season, then someone like Tillman or Cornette or Queta or all of them are going to have like big roles and they're going to have these big minute games. And I think when you look at it, maybe you could have a different opinion on this, but I think if you look at those 3 guys, to me, the clear best player is Tillman. He had a lot of struggles last season with his knee, but a year before he was a starting center on that Grizzlies team, and you're holding his own against Anthony Davis. And I can't really say that Queta or Luke Cornette has shown that level of production, but then Tillman couldn't hit a single 2-pointer all of last season and was just miserable with his knee injury and all that sort of stuff in Memphis. But he is the best player, whether it gets there or not. But those opportunities, John, are going to be there.
They are. And he's going to have a chance to kind of show his full capability, because assuming his knee is going to be healthy, he'll and that he's more comfortable. He's going to have a full offseason of having, just pick up the phone and call Joe Mazzulla and be like, what is it that you needed me to do? Run me through some of these other things. And he can kind of take like his homework over the summer and specifically work on Celtics related things so he can be a bigger contributor. He knows, Cornette knows, Keita knows. They all understand that the opportunity is there through December and maybe through the All-Star break, because whenever Porzingis comes back, there's still going to be a ramp up time where he's definitely not playing in back-to-backs. So last season, the Celtics staggered Porzingis and Horford, but that on a back-to-back still gives those other three guys real chances to either on the front end or the back end to come on in and make a contribution. So it depends on the competition. You might look at Keita and be like, he misses a lot of shots around the rim. He gets his own rebound. So he could be kind of like a rebounding guy every once in a while if you're stuck. So those guys have an opportunity from a basketball perspective to make a contribution to the Celtics, and from a fantasy perspective to give you a couple of things, to give you a few baskets, to give you shooting percentage, to give you rebounds in a pinch.
That's why when we look at this team, we can say there's not a lot to pay attention to, but working out how they're going to utilize those centers when those opportunities arise. Is there a clear hierarchy? Is it just pull a name out of the hat? Look, that we need to pay attention to that, because there are going to be plenty of opportunities. But John, you're such a professional. The way that you transitioned me into talking about the return and the injury to Kristaps Porzingis, because that is what we need to get to right now, because he's got an injury that I haven't really seen much in the NBA. I don't know if anyone's even had this injury in the NBA after he returned during the playoffs, and now he's had surgery, and he's probably, let's say conservative, is he back in the 2024 portion of this season? I think that's a 50-50 to me.
Yeah, the time frame makes me feel like Christmas is the target.
Yep.
So it's maybe, and then that puts you into the, well, if it goes well, then it might be early December. If they want to play it super conservatively, which the Celtics absolutely have a track record, a proven track record with Porzingis this past season, whatever you think the timeline's going to be, add something to the end of it. So they are going to try to make as sure as well as they can that he's going to be back available and in the best position not to injure himself again. So it's possible that he misses the 2024 portion of the schedule. And I mean, Christmas is at the end of December anyway, so it could be January. They could try to make it so, and it might depend on the schedule. They could make it so there's like a ramp up, a kind of slow working in through the All-Star break, use the All-Star break as a way to evaluate and kind of see how he's done through a month and a half of basketball, and then put a plan moving forward. So it's hard to say when he's going to be back. I'm using Christmas as my target.
I think that's the obvious one, but you're reading my mind with this, John, because my next question was going to be, when do you think would be a realistic target for him to even be at 30 minutes a game? I'd say it's after the All-Star break, honestly, because he's not doing that in January. He's playing probably 25 minutes a night for 2, 3, 4 weeks. All-Star break is always a nice little delineating factor. It's like, oh, let's get to this, and then you have a little time to rest, and we see how everything is tracking, and then come out of that, and then we're ready to go, which for fantasy makes it impossible to draft him, considering how much time he's going to miss, and then when he comes back, it's going to be limited, then he's going to miss games. It's impossible in that scenario. But all of those things, and because this team is so good, John, he doesn't need to do any of these things. They don't need to push him back, and that's something we are going to get to in a second. Now, the player that you said for us to watch is, it's not likely that many other people that come on, many other hosts are going to say, the player we need to watch is the man who's been in the league for 50 years and is 35 years of age. But Al Horford's got a bigger responsibility now this season, because he has to be that starter. Now, they will not push his body. He will not start these back-to-backs. But will he, do you think, play more minutes in some of these games instead of like a 26-minute, 24-minute role? Will he be getting 30 minutes because maybe they're not as comfortable with the reserves there? And how will that how will that go in terms of his body? Because he did some things last year. Obviously, they were able to keep him safe and keep him healthy, but he was able to, like, some of his shooting numbers, like 42% on threes, not that he took that many, like he was able to change a lot of the shooting profile of his numbers last season, mainly because he wasn't required to do more, but he is now. Yeah,
I don't think they're going to push him. And that is, there is going to be a kind of maybe desire to test it, but I don't know if the Celtics are going to want to go that route, because at his age, the upside is what, 3 more minutes of Al Horford?
Yeah, what's the point?
I don't think that's something that they really want to get into. The Celtics have obviously, we saw them win a ton of road games. Would they lose 1 road game in the entire playoff run? They are extraordinarily good on the road. So if for some reason they fall to a 2nd seed or a 3rd seed, I don't think that makes them uncomfortable. They feel good about winning on the road. So if they have to go to a number 1 or a number 2 seed in the conference finals, they that doesn't bother them at all. So they won't, I don't think, feel the need to chase that number 1 seed if it means putting Al Horford at risk. They do feel good about Cornette. They do feel good about Tillman. And they do feel, they feel okay about Keita too. So those 3 guys will have their chances, and we can throw in, hey, an occasional lineup of Jason Tatum at the 5. Super small, super switchable, depending on the opponent. You can go that route, and it'll be okay for, you're not going to do it against Philly. You're not going to do it against Embiid. You're not going to do it against Jokic, but in certain situations that could also get you an extra 4 minutes in a game if you need it to. So the Celtics feel like they have enough guys to get through. They're comfortable however they land in the standings. And I'm not saying this is a direct, they won the East by 14 games. It's not like they're coming in with a 14-game pad. But if they play similarly to the last season, minus, some of these minutes, they probably feel like, well, if we win the East by 4 games instead of 14, we're just fine with it.
Yeah, that also brings me, again, you're just, without even seeing the run sheet, you're just perfectly leading me in, because last season, well, to me, one of the major storylines around this team, especially from my point of view in talking about fantasy basketball, is, I won't spoil it just yet, but last year people would get upset at me. Now, you were enjoying a historic team that was winning, that won 64 regular season games, won the title, but I wasn't critical. I was more critical of the media in covering that this team here instituted an aggressive and useful and important load management strategy all season. And I'm always really critical of the way that the media in parts had picked on the Clippers when guys like Paul George and Kawhi missed games because they were hurt. The Celtics guys rested guys wholesale through the season, which was 100% what they needed to do and is easily the correct decision. We saw it for the last 3 months of the season. You'd get like, you've played 4 in a row, have 1 off, and then you have 1 off, and then you have 1 off, and then you play 31 minutes instead of 33 minutes, and Al Horford hasn't played a back-to-back in 3 years, and Porzingis is going to be limited, and we'll push him out an extra week, because they knew what the end goal was, and it worked really easily. So people would get upset because I'd use the dreaded LM word and called it load management, but that is literally what they did for half of the season, where guys would just, if you look at everyone's numbers, everyone's minutes pushed down, and their games played pushed down, and they might only missed 5 or 6 games over a 2-month period, but those players weren't hurt in any of those games, which again, I will stress, John, just in case any of your Celtics people see this, was 100% the correct move, and I am praising them for doing that. They're not going to deviate from that again, and they've got the double-ended problem here of they extended into the postseason, so they played into June. 4 of their starters played in the Olympics, which is not just 2 weeks in France. It's the practice time and exhibition games beforehand. So all of their off-season is done. So is there a world that you're pushing this, say, load management, let's say smart basketball, are they going to be doing that for a longer period this season? Because that fatigue is a real problem, and it was a successful mode for them last season.
I think the way they do that, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did, Tatum and Brown didn't really participate in the load management last season. They did towards the end, maybe a little bit more.
Less than the others, I grant you that, but they still would miss 3-4 games here, and instead of 35, they'd play 33 minutes or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think at the beginning of the season, we might see a little bit more of them in the load management. I think, and who knows, maybe Derek White, who's been extraordinarily durable, maybe he sits a little bit more often.
I'll correct you there, John. He's been extraordinarily durable in Boston. In San Antonio, one of the biggest criticisms of him was he couldn't stay healthy. He had multiple toe injuries and foot injuries, and that's part of the fantasy. I can't draft Derek White. He's always hurt. Goes to Boston, never gets hurt now. Is that because of the change in, was it latitude? Probably not. It's just stuff that happens, right? So and there is a risk with that stuff as well.
Yeah, and the Celtics were, I think, pretty fortunate last season when it came to injuries.
Yep. Apart from Porzingis,
outside of Porzingis, Horford was pretty good. Tatum was pretty good. Jalen missed a little bit of time, but nothing serious. So there might be a little bit more of that hits them this year because they didn't get as much rest and recuperation. But whatever the Celtics need to do, they will do. So if that means a little bit more load management or sticking to 25 minutes for Horford or sticking to, 33 minutes for Jason Tatum, that is his absolute minutes limit, even though he likes to play 37 or 38. And that just might mean an extra minute on either side of when he comes out in the first and third quarters. But if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. And I think they're going to be diligent about that, more so than they were in the past, because again, everything that you've said, everything that's led up to this, they don't want to give into, well, Tatum likes to play. Well, yeah, you also like to win championships. So we got to make sure that you're winning these championships. It's a short window. They've got this upcoming season, maybe the season after that, and then who knows? So if you want to do the legacy thing, your best chance is to do it this way. And if the Celtics feel like they need to sit these guys maybe a little bit longer, at least to start the season, ramp them up a little bit later, then they will absolutely do that with no fear.
Yep, they had no fear about it doing it last year. They did it for a prolonged period of time, which again is the correct and smart thing to do. It is not people have made this into this giant negative thing. It is the smartest thing. Imagine you're 14 games up and you're playing your starters 40 minutes a night and then 3 of them get hurt in March. That is the most idiotic thing you could possibly do. And just so we get one game where they score 30 points against the Hornets team that's starting Leaky Black, who cares? Playing the right way, and again, the ultimate success came. It's not always going to come, but that's how you put yourself in that best position. To me, John, the burning question for this season isn't it's not that burning. It's sort of smoldering. It was burning and then sort of just died out. But who is the one player that they cannot afford to get hurt? Now, this is basically just a roundabout way of me saying, is Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum more replaceable? Or maybe you've got a different answer. Maybe it's losing what Derek White does or Drew Holiday's defense. Or maybe it is Al Horford. If Al Horford goes down and then you have to start Neemias Queta for 3-4 months in a row. Who's the one player right now, Porzingis already out, that they cannot afford to lose?
Yeah, I might say, obviously you want to say Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum, but if it's one of those guys, I'm okay with a lineup where it's White, Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, and Peyton Pritchard or something like that, because you still have a high level scorer. You still have 2 elite role players. Al Horford is really good at what he does, and you have some talent off the bench. It sounds weird to say that losing Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum is less harmful than losing Al Horford, but because of the Porzingis circumstance, it's tough if you're going in with those guys and you have to play Luke Cornett, Xavier Tillman big minutes, especially if Tillman's shot still doesn't fall. Now you've got non-shooters at the 5 that you can leave defensively, pack the paint, and you can defend Tatum and Brown better. Whereas if you have Horford on the floor, you can spread the floor, and that allows White and Holiday to pick up some of that slack, getting into the paint, drive and kick, bend the defense kind of stuff. So the impact on the team of losing Horford and having non-shooters, you get 3 non-shooters at your center spot. If you're consistently playing non-shooters at your center spot, now you got real issues with the spacing. Spacing is like the number one thing that Joe Mazzulla preaches when he comes to his offense. And if that offense isn't clicking, that impacts the defense, it impacts the transition. And so that's where the Celtics will end up struggling more. You're putting more of a workload on Tatum and Brown, and that increases their risk. So I'm going to say it's still Al Horford, just because of the potential cascading impact on the rest of the team.
This is very similar to the discussion I had with Nick yesterday when talking about the Mavs and talking about the Mavericks' biggest addition. And he's like, it's not Klay Thompson, it's Najee Marshall, because having someone who can actually go out and defend is what makes everything else work. And while it's no one is arguing whether Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown are they worse players than Al Horford. Like, no, not a single person is saying that. But basketball's not who's the best player, who's the one-on-one guy. It's about how it all fits. Because if Jaylen Brown was to go down, well, we talked earlier in the show, John, about how Drew Holiday's usage dropped down 8 or 9 percentage points. So if Jaylen Brown goes down, well, you know what? Drew Holiday can just do more. Like, he can just do more. And Sam Hauser can come in and replace some shooting, and Peyton Pritchard can do some ball handling. They can just do more. But if Horford goes down, like you said, we're not going to see Luke Cornett turning into Porzingis, despite the obvious physical similarities in terms of hair, skin color, length of arms. We're not going to they're not the same player. That doesn't happen. But if Brown or Tatum goes out, well, Derek White does more and Drew Holiday does more, and we can cover that a little bit. So it is a different way that not everyone, a lot of people look at it this way, but some people won't. And they'll just go, well, of course, the best player is this, and if he goes down, we're cooked. But it all is context dependent. The bold prediction that you gave me, John, I wouldn't say it's that bold, but what else are we going to do with this team? Your bold prediction is that they win again. I want to turn this around to say, will they repeat as champions? Of course, they're their favourite to do that. That is a totally reasonable prediction. My question then, I'll twist this to you, is, and you talked about it already, about the window. What is the window here? Is this a 3-year thing because of monetary concerns, because of Al Horford's AIDS concerns, Porzingis' health concerns? Is it got to be these 3 years? Can it extend further than this?
The second apron, the dreaded second apron, is at the heart of all of this stuff. It's why they brought back the exact same team with no free agent additions. They didn't have any free agent to bring in. They couldn't even bring in a ring chaser unless it was on a minimum. And the way things have gone financially in the NBA, this is a weird time with no context. We don't understand what the long-term impact is going to be on players going to championship teams and championship teams being able to extend their windows. But we know that the goal of this thing is to break up teams like the Celtics, to make it so unviable to financially keep this together that they have no choice but to not just break up the team, but let guys walk. You can't even get anything back if
that's true.
Holiday, in a couple of years you move Holiday. It's your only choice is to kind of move them into cap space and maybe get a draft pick. Like, it's so hard to predict, but I can look at next summer being very similar to this. In fact, that's actually incorrect, because they already signed everybody to their extensions this summer. Yeah. So next summer will be even more boring because there's nobody, not even their own players, to re-sign. So it's, if they are willing to continue to pay, then the window will extend into a third year. But as we've all heard, I'm sure, that third year is going to be so expensive. They might be the most expensive NBA team in history. So maybe they can do that for one season, but that coincides with the end of Porzingis' contract. It's right near the end of the Holiday extension. Maybe he's got one more year after that. The question really is, what can Brad Stevens do letting those guys go? how long is the dip? Is it a full rebuild or is it a partial rebuild? Or will the league have settled in a place where Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derek White is enough star power where the rest of the league is also coming down in star power because the attempt to get that parity is taking hold, and there's no team that stands out as this is a juggernaut. If the Celtics can kind of slide into, well, we're not the top team anymore, we're the third or fourth best team, and that just gives us a chance, then maybe that extends the window kind of in a weird way. But it's this year, next year if they decide to pay the big bill, and then after that it's kind of a shrug, and we'll see what the CBA does to the rest of the league.
In 3 years' time, John, don't worry, the Bulls will have finally torn it down. Jerry Reinsdorf's paid up and invested, and they're going to be an unstoppable juggernaut. So the rest of the league just might as well take it off from them.
And Lonzo will be right there ready to come back and make a big impact.
Everyone's ready. Zach LaVine has turned it around. It's all happening for Chicago in 3 years. Just take my word for it. Prediction for the record for this team, John. We've said it multiple times already. They won 64 games last season, and because you hate Boston, you've predicted them to win 59 this season. A typical media Boston hater. Yeah. The media is just full of people that hate Boston all the time, and you're one of them. You contribute to the problem. You've got about 59 wins for this upcoming season, which again, I think predicting 64, there's really only one way to go, and that's down. Like, it's very hard to hit that number, especially with these injuries. I don't think we need to belabor that point too much, but what I do want to end the show with, John, is a little quick quiz that I'm offering these hosts, and we are hitting it. It's very simple. We're heading into the 24-25 season, John. So what I want you to tell me is, this is a tough one for the Celtics because there's only 5 players that qualify. Who's the first person that comes to mind that has worn number 24 or number 25 for the Boston Celtics? There's only 5 players who have worn these numbers because they are both retired. And the last, hey, but you wrote a book. What is 100 Facts to Know About the Celtics Before You Die? So you know all this history, but these numbers have not been worn since 1969. So. Good luck.
Sam Jones.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's why you are a New York Times selling best author, not verified with the New York Times. That is fantastic. Number 24 is Sam Jones.
Nelson?
No. Do you want to see if you can get all 5? Sam Jones is 24. Okay. That's retired. There's only one person who's ever worn 25, and it is retired.
Number 25.
He retired in 1967. He played from 59 to 67.
Is it McCauley?
Nope.
It's not McCauley. He played in 59.
Some of these names I've never heard of.
Wait,
but I have
25 was Casey Jones.
It is Casey Jones, correct. You have got the 2 retired names, the 2 Joneses, Sam Jones, Casey Jones. The other 24s, I honestly, I've never heard of these guys. You may have. They all played like for 1 year only. It was Fred Skolin, Harry Boykoff, and Jerry Callie. Well, no idea.
No clue.
Let's talk. Let's do a little quick. How many in the 90s? 90 is not a common number in the NBA. Any number in the 90s, but the Celtics have had people wear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the numbers in the 90s. Can you name anyone who's been a number in the 90s for the Celtics? There's heaps of them. I feel like that's way more than any other team.
Yeah. Well, Taco Fall did.
Correct.
Jay Crowder did.
There were 2 of 5 players to have worn number 99 for Boston.
Yeah, Blake Griffin did.
Yep.
Who else came in?
That's a lot, man.
That's 3 of 5 that were in the 90s?
No, there's 5 people who wore 99 alone. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11 players have worn numbers in the 90s for the Celtics. Again, it seems like a lot.
I feel like there might have been a couple in the COVID year.
Let's have a look. Yeah, well, Taco Fall was one of those around that time. Evan Fournier wore 94.
Okay, yeah.
Then it's like Justin Champagny for his 2 seconds with the team.
Sure.
Darko Milicic was 99.
Gotta forget Darko.
Amir Johnson was number 90. I forgot that.
Yes,
and
was Amir Johnson.
Jason Collins 98, Broderick Thomas 97, PJ Brown 93. And Roy Rogers, number 99, who was the first man to break the 90s number barrier for the Boston Celtics. John, that is it. We are done. So thank you for coming on and chatting about this team that we managed to talk for 40 minutes about when there's nothing to talk about. So that is
this was supposed to be the short show.
It was supposed to be the short show, but you know what? We just able to like expand our minds and go into different areas and talk about the jiu-jitsu legend that is Joe Mazzulla. What have you got going on over at Locked On Celtics at the moment?
Well, lots of Jason Tatum talk that has sustained us for a little bit. Lessons learned from the Olympics and stuff like that. And then we're, as Joe Mazzulla has been saying and Brad Stevens has been saying, it's time to turn the page. We're going to start looking forward in upcoming shows to this upcoming season and start to kind of tackle some of the stuff that we talked about on this podcast a little bit more in depth.
Go check out Locked On Celtics with John, who's been doing it for years and years and years, same amount of time that I've been doing it over here, and he is the best in the business. John, thanks again for coming on and chatting about the NBA champion Boston Celtics.
You got it, my friend.
And that does bring us to the end of the Celtics show. I thought it would be short, but me and John just talk forever. That's what happens when you've done these preview shows with someone since, 2016? Me and John have been doing these shows together. We've got a lot to talk about. So if you did enjoy the show, hit a thumb up and leave your comments down below. You know how that works over on the old YouTube. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.